Hi there, my name's Jen Starling. Thanks for joining me. We're going to make this mixed media project of a bunny and her little friend. It's a hybrid ladybug turtle. You'll see I'm starting here with a nice and light sketch using a pencil. I'm just finding the composition using very simple shapes to begin to formulate the main focal point of the piece, the bunny figure. Used a circle for the head, rectangle for the body, which is going to become a dress. As I draw the legs here, I like to use little circles for the knees that help give me an idea of the proportions, how tall she's going to be. I'm just drawing very basic squares for the feet. You'll see that I move on to the little friend character here, using a circle for the head and a half circle for the shell. Adding a little bit of facial features as I go to give me an idea of the expression, but I'm not getting too invested in any marks because I know that this is just the very under layer and that I'm going to be building, covering up, and adding different supplies on top of all of this pencil sketch. I'm using Mod Podge here as a glue. If you don't have Mod Podge laying around, there's a couple of different options. You can use a watered down variation of acrylic paint, just a bit of acrylic and water. Not too thick though, or you're not going to see the pattern of the paper that you're using. You could also try a water-based glue such as Elmer's. See how that works. I haven't used it before, but maybe do a little test to make sure that you can layer acrylic paint or whatever paint you're using on top of that. The fun part about this is mixing different patterns and colors. I'm not thinking too much about what I'm doing here, just a pretty spontaneous layering of these different papers, creating the ground here below the horizon that is giving lots of depth and dimension to the piece. It's pretty important when you're applying these layers of scrap paper that you put a good bit of the Mod Podge underneath and on top of the paper. You don't want any air bubbles. You want to get it nice and smooth so that it doesn't peel up on the edges. You're going to see as I'm working with these scrap papers, I'm going to apply it throughout the entire piece of art, bring it up into her dress, into her ears, and then into the little lady turtle shell as well. Generally speaking, you want to use each different material throughout the entire piece of art. That helps to make it come together as a whole. If you don't have any patterned paper at home, you can get the same effect using your paint, just using different colors and patterns to add this kind of variation. am starting to paint. I have the primary colors on my palette. I have yellow, blue, and red, as well as some black and white, and a little bit of that light pink you'll see down at the bottom. I believe it's called Portrait Pink in acrylic. If you don't have that, don't worry. You can just mix your red and white together to make a light pink. I'm using the dark paint on the left side of her dress there to just define the light source a bit. I have the light coming in from the right side of the page. I've already made that decision before starting. And then I'm going to be adding some light highlight on the right side of her dress. That just makes her a little bit more believable. Add some form and volume to the shapes. I'm doing the same thing here with the lady turtle bug's shell, giving a nice light highlight on the top where the light's coming from, and then it's going to get darker as it moves around to under her head and the underneath part of her shell. If you think about how light hits, you get a nice bright shine where the light is hitting directly, and then as the object blocks the light, it turns into shadow. I'm bringing some paint into her face now. I'm using the light pink color at the bottom of my palette. This is just a real kind of basic light pinkish Caucasian flesh tone, but you can certainly adjust this color and get a variation of skin tones. But also keep in mind that she is a rabbit and she doesn't necessarily have to have a realistic skin color. She could be white, blue, yellow, red. It really is open to your creativity for this. You will see that I'm still thinking about that light source and that the value is going to be lighter because of the light source coming from the right side of the page where I just tapped. Value is the range from light to dark, and it will give your figure or your object form. I'm adding a little bit of pink to her cheeks. The more color variation that you can get in the face, the more interesting that it's going to be. I generally like to use a little bit of yellow in the forehead and lighter color in the forehead as well. But I also know that this is just early stage, and I'm going to get a lot more layers in her face. So I'm trying not to get too detailed with any one area of the painting too early, but work throughout to get the first layer on and then go over different areas again when I see what needs to happen a little bit later on. And I'll certainly add more layers to her face, but I am getting in those features with a little bit of the black paint. If you use your fingertip to smudge a little bit, that can help give it a soft quality. I'm using the dark paint to add a shadow below the figures. This is going to really help to define your light source coming in. Soon you're going to see me start to build a background layer. I'm just going to mix some of the blue, white, and a little bit of black, a gray bluish color. Generally speaking, you don't want to use a color straight out of the tube. Just can be a little bit too intense. We want to give the viewer some recognition of what they see in reality in their everyday lives, even though this isn't a realistic scene. If you can emulate some familiarity to the viewer, they'll be more convinced. You can also add the background layer before even drawing in the characters. The order here is flexible. The difference when I add the background paint when I did is that you have to pay a little bit more attention to the edges where the paint is meeting the figures. I like to have a soft edge in some areas and a little bit sharper in others. When you can create this soft intersection between the background and the character, it makes the figure become more part of her environment. At this point, I start to go back and forth between the figures and the background. Now that I have her pretty well blended in with the background color, you'll see that I want to try to make her pop out just a little bit more, and I'm doing that by adding some high contrast, that stark white on the side where the light's coming in, and I'll add some darker shades as well on her left side. It's really just a back and forth at this point between having her integrated with the environment but also standing out. to come together, except I'm not happy with the shape of her head. That's why I was sort of covering the ears and top to try to get an idea of what it would look like with a little bit of a shorter head. You'll see I went ahead and took the background color and actually carved off some of that space on her forehead. A kind of bold move at the time. You're not really sure what it's gonna come to, but when I know it's not working for me, there's not a whole lot of risk because I wasn't happy with it to begin with. So I'm just kind of playing around here, not exactly sure where I'm heading, but trying to experiment in hopes that it'll start to come together for me. You'll see that I added some more scrap paper. What this does is it gives me more options in terms of layering. I start to bring some paint into the turtlebug character's face here. This is a great opportunity to show lots of round volume with the light source. I'm going to add a nice highlight on the top edge of the head. and then it's going to darken as it circles around where light isn't hitting. I'm feeling pretty good about it at this point, but I do think that that right upper corner in the background needs a little bit more layering, a little bit more interesting surface. So I'm using the same papers that I have just below it. It looks like a reflection from the ground to the sky. You want a good balance of some calm space that gives the viewer a little bit of break, in addition with the areas of interest. I'm going to end up bringing the background color up into those papers to blend them in and make them fade into the background just a little bit more. And then I'm really pretty much finished. I'm just adding a few extra marks to the background, giving it a little bit more texture. A great way to get variations in textures besides using your brush is also to dab it with your hand or a rag. Doing this before the paint dries will give you a nice variation in texture.